Are we live streaming this?
Yes.
Live stream. Thank you very much. Okay, good morning. On a really wet morning, I think everywhere we're very glad we're on Zoom. This is a hearing of the Policy and Regulatory Committee on the consultation we did on the proposed high pedestrian traffic areas for the towns of Tuakau, I think it was Tuakau, Tekowhata, Ngaruawahia, Huntly and Tekowhata. So we have one apology from Councillor Church, and I see pretty much everybody else is here except for
The Mayor.
Brown. So with those two, could I please have a mover and a seconder to accept those apologies? Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Smith, all in favour.
Did you have the Mayor, Madam Chair?
Did I have which?
The Mayor?
I have, yes, and you moved it.
Yep.
Thank you. Confirmation of the status of agenda and the reports within. We have one submitter, and that is Mr. O'Hagan. He will be speaking a little later on. Please could I have a mover for the status of agenda? Thank you, Councillor Gibb. Councillor McAnally, all in favour. Thank you. We've just got out of the hand thing again, haven't we? Against, carried. Are there any disclosures of interest in this consultation? No. Thank you very much. Moving on to the reports.
Madam Chair, I see the Mayor has popped up. Sorry.
Okay, well, he will just be a late arrival. So Bessie, Bessie or Melissa, are you going to take us through the hearings report part, please, which is on page 5 of your agendas?
Yep, that'll be me. So good morning, everyone. So the consultation on earthquake-prone buildings and high pedestrian traffic areas was open from the 13th of April to 13th of May this year. A total of 18 submissions were received during this period. Out of these submissions, one has indicated that they wanted to speak in support of their submission today. Just noting that there is a change to this. Today's speaker is now submitter 4006 Shane O'Hagan, whose submission you will find on page 13.
Is that you there? Is that you done there, Bessie?
Yep, done.
Okay. So I do see from reading through the submissions that there's been a little perhaps confusion almost over what we asked, and I wondered if we could have been in retrospect a little clearer. We obviously knew whether and Mr. Ballack may be able to help me out there, we knew where the unreinforced masonry buildings were. I'm not clear that we put them on the map or not. Did we do that?
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't, Madam Chair, and that was because we hadn't identified all the people in those buildings at that time, and it was also kind of seen to be pinpointing them and, for want of a better term, singling them out a little bit. So we just erred on the side of caution with that. Okay,
thank you, because I see a lot of submitters submitted and subsequently there was no unreinforced masonry in the areas. So now we could hear from Mr. O'Hagan on, if you'd like to take yourself off mute and tell us what you thought in your submission. 10 minutes, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I was just interested, and that probably covered one of the points which you had decided were unreinforced masonry buildings. Out of that lot, I think as far as if you're looking to impose those sort of things on building owners, then those building owners should be aware as if you are considering that their building is one of them or not. And also the data that's been collected to identify whether these are high pedestrian or high vehicle areas, and whether you've used that data to identify these streets or whether you've used data as to the state of the building itself instead. So is somebody in a position to answer those questions?
Yeah, is that Luke? Is that you?
I can talk to that.
Oh,
Madam Chair. So the buildings were assessed in accordance with the methodology set by MB, and it also the guidance given to us in terms of what a high pedestrian area was or was not. That was how we made the assessments. So in going out to the public, we were simply asking, did they agree with our estimation of a high pedestrian area? So one goes hand in hand with the other. If it's not a high pedestrian area, then it doesn't become a high priority building. If it's an unreinforced masonry building in a high pedestrian area, then it becomes a priority building. And so that was why we were seeking what was and was not a high pedestrian area. So has that answered your question?
Not particularly. What I was really like to know is what is the definition of a high pedestrian area? You've said that you've identified these as high pedestrian, and do we agree? But you haven't actually laid out any background as to what MB determines as high pedestrian.
So there's quite a clear...
Chairman, could I just interject here, please? We're here to listen to submissions. We're not here to answer questions, in my view. I'm sorry to say the time to ask those questions of the submitter was prior to this hearing. We're here to listen to his submissions, not his questions, with the greatest respect.
And my understanding is that, Mr. O'Hagan, you have had quite an extensive response. So is there... And
I don't think I've had any response to date.
I was sorry, Madam Chair, I was on the understanding we'd sent through the MB guidance on what was and wasn't high pedestrian areas, sir.
No, I've never seen it.
Okay, well, maybe we will just send that to you again, because the report indicates that you have been given the information that you are looking for.
The only contact I've had was Bessie contacted me on Friday and apologised for not contacting me earlier, and said there was a meeting this morning and she had sent a link through which arrived about 25 minutes ago.
Oh, that's lovely to have you along, and thank you for your interest. But certainly there has, if it hasn't arrived with you, then Bessie will check with you as to what and where. But my understanding of this was that quite a comprehensive package that answered your questions to the point of the unreinforced masonry, and also the definition of high pedestrian areas. So if we take those as on their way to you, then if you can just, is there anything more that you want to tell us about your submission? Since we've answered.
Oh yeah, I'd like to know what data's been collected as far as volume of pedestrians and traffics on those roads, and how it compares with other streets in the Narrawahia that you've collected it for.
Right. So thank you for that. We'll address that in a response to you as well.
Right. And has the council considered, I see that after 12 and a half years from the date it's issued, the owner has the option of either strengthening or demolishing. And I was wondering whether the council has considered the effect of owners that are demolishing buildings in those streets that you have highlighted, particularly in the corner of Jesmond and Great South Road there. If that building was to be demolished, based on probably the cost to strengthen it, and also the one across the road, how that would affect the town centre at all. So
I do understand your point, but that's actually out of the scope of this specific consultation, which is which of those buildings, which are the high traffic areas. So should they be demolished, and clearly they would be quite iconic buildings in the towns, I'm sure that there would be consultation at that point, and your input would be really helpful.
Yeah. And is the council aware that...
I have a question from Councillor Patterson for you. We're getting short on time.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to catch up with Shane offline here and discuss some of those questions or comments that he is raising now around some of those particular sites. That might be helpful for Shane to work through that with myself and Councillor Gibb if she wishes.
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered, just briefly, is the council aware that some of those buildings down there share common walls and what would be the outcome if one owner perhaps was wanting to strengthen and another one was wanting to demolish, and they shared a common
So again, Mr. O'Hagan, I would have to point you to this is ultra vires. This is not germane to this consultation. The consultation is on which are the buildings and which are the high pedestrian traffic areas. It's not on the effects of demolishing, strengthening, or whatever. It's specific on this point.
Okay, so the information that you're going to send, it details how the data was collected and how it's applied with MB, is it? Is that what you're telling me you're going to send me?
That is my understanding of what was in the package.
Okay, and is it going to identify the buildings that you consider are unreinforced masonry in those areas?
That I can't answer. I'm sorry.
It would be rather relevant though, wouldn't it?
Well, I would imagine it would. I imagine it would have them. Yes.
And just finally, sorry to interrupt you. So what is the purpose of this meeting today then? Is it for you people to determine that yes, these are the high pedestrian areas and this is where you're going to move forward from?
Correct.
Right. So surely that sort of information has got to be pertinent to make any decision.
Correct.
And it hasn't been provided.
We know which are the unreinforced masonry buildings in the areas that have been highlighted and submitted on as high pedestrian traffic areas.
Yes, but unfortunately the people that you're asking to comment on it or submit on it don't have that information. So how do we make a submission on that when you've retained the information and haven't disseminated it to the people that you're asking to comment on it?
At the point of going out with this consultation, we had not identified all of them. We now know where people are identifying high pedestrian traffic areas, and the council will make sure that all the buildings in those high pedestrian traffic areas will be checked to ensure that they do not have unreinforced masonry. Should they have unreinforced masonry, then that will be a discussion between the council, building department and the owners of or lessees of the building.
Right. I think there's a distinct lack of information, but that's my point of view.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And I'm sorry, but your time is up. But look, I do appreciate that we appreciate that you've taken the time to talk to us. There does appear to have been a cross in communication, and I'm sure that the package which we were assured had been sent to you is on its way. So thank you very much for your submission. That's
right. And if they can just confirm when they did send it, would be perfect too. Thanks.
I'm sure Bessie will be in touch with you.
Lovely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Right. We are now, so that's at the end of our submissions. We're now going to the deliberations report on page 17, please. And Bessie, would you like to take us? There are a number of points on page 19 under the matters raised in submission. I think simply if we just go through those so we have an understanding of what the outcomes are, and then we have a recommendation on page 18. So Bessie, if you can take us to page 19, Ngaruawahia.
Yes, so our first key issue is extending the high pedestrian area in Ngaruawahia to include the portion of Galileo Street starting at Newcastle Street to Community House on the corner and link back to include the remainder of Martin Street. Several submissions recommended including this portion, noting that it was a high traffic area and key businesses are located on this route. However, staff noted that whilst there is sufficient pedestrian traffic along this route, there are currently no buildings containing URM located on this route, and the buildings are sufficiently set back from the footpath, so the threat to public safety is minimal, and propose no changes to include this area.
So, Mr. Ballack, can you confirm that these have been ground truthed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, I can.
Okay, thank you. So unless there's a comment on that.
Madam, yeah, I know. Sorry, I missed part of the start of the meeting because we couldn't get the sound going. I'm in my office working today, and so I'm using a big pad in here trying to do it. So I assume you can hear me, can you?
We can hear you, and you are visible in a rather large room.
Small version, I know. I wish. Yeah, look, interesting, and I did catch the last matter. I think there's a clear misunderstanding by some people as for the purpose of this, and I know it is around identifying high pedestrians, but probably the information that came through from Envy around the earthquake boundaries, I would say, between our northern part of our district versus the part we're talking about here is probably not clearly understood, and how the rules change between one and the other. And I think the day was, and I think Mr. Bellick will know this through discussions I've had with him over the years, that this day was always getting closer to people who actually had to do something with their buildings within a certain period of time, and we're getting closer to that D-Day. And I think people are starting to get jittery as to what they do with their assets. But at the end of the day, the only way we can look at this is this a high pedestrian area or not? And I would say somebody who works in Narrowinga most days at the moment, I would say where we have identified definitely are the high pedestrian areas. And I know it's pouring down with rain here at the moment, but normally at this time of the day, there'd be lots of people dining along the street there and things like that. So yeah, I think that probably it has been identified as the right location. So all we need to focus on is effectively the argument is this a high pedestrian or not? And I would suggest it probably, for the numbers compared to other streets in town, it probably is a high pedestrian.
Can I just make a comment? Pardon me, a comment there that the Act says that which contains buildings with unreinforced masonry that have the potential to fall. So that's the second part of it. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In my view, we have the recently, in terms of a century old, you've got social welfare, MSD, you've got a kindergarten, you've got the Memorial Hall, the doctors, and the old manse, which is the community facility in that area that's suggested by these people. High pedestrian, but there is no building, unless the Memorial Hall, and perhaps Mr. Merv can tell us about that. But the reality is the high volume of traffic, but no buildings. I think that's what the staff have outlined. And so I think the Mayor and others have alluded to a confusion as to what we're trying to do. So can't support the addition of the green unless Merv tells us otherwise on the Memorial Hall. Thank you.
And Sir, Madam, through you, Madam Chair, Sir, if, even if it were high URM, and it might be simpler, Madam Chair, to use the term URM than spitting out unreinforced masonry every time.
Which I can't really do, yes.
It's look, even if it were unreinforced masonry, the collapse of that would have little or no effect on anyone there, but I don't believe it to be. Currently, I don't believe it to be, no.
So what you're saying is, I think what the nub of this is it may be high pedestrian, and they've identified it, but since there are no URM buildings, or those buildings that are there in some cases have significant setbacks, they are of no consequence. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm happy to, with that picture on page 16, to leave it as is. As per the conversation that's just been said, these are either wooden structure buildings or single level buildings, and they do not have URM conditions with them. So the identified area in the yellow is where these buildings are located. And yeah, I think there's just confusion between high pedestrian areas, but also linking that up to URMs as well. So
yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. And also just referring to the town, the Memorial Hall, yes, there was some earthquake issues identified a few years ago. That subsequently come back at a lot lower level, much lower level earthquake issues around that. So
yeah, thank you.
That need to be included. Thank you.
So what I'm hearing is Ngunnawal here, as it is fine. Right. Okay. So moving on to Huntly. Again, this is a very similar situation. There's no URM, and it doesn't meet that, and it doesn't meet that criteria. Are there any comments on that? Oh, sorry, Bessie. Bessie, I've taken over from you. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
The only thing I would say, Madam Chair, is when I look at the request for Onslow Street, I'm trying to figure out why you would include Onslow Street. It's no different than what we've just been talking about. There's no buildings there that would actually meet that criteria, overhang the footpath or anything. The closest building of any substance here is probably the church on the corner, and it's well set back off the footpath. So I don't quite know what anyone's thoughts are on that.
Well, it's in line with the recommendation is in line with exactly what you're saying. There's no changes. If there's no other comment on that from the local councillors, then that remains as it is. That's not me. That must be somebody else.
Please carry on, Pastor Moore.
All right. As long as it's going past, you're fine. Number 3 on page 21 is the inclusion of Hakanoa Street in Huntly's high pedestrian area. So I submitted, I've done it again, Bessie, I'm sorry. Submitted noted that. And there is an amendment there. So any comments on that?
Don't support Hakanoa Street whatsoever. Same issue as I said on Onslow Street.
You don't, or you do?
No, I don't support the concept of including Hakanoa Street.
Okay, so it's got the old fire station is a URM building.
Yeah, but the trouble is the fire station is right on the footpath. I'll admit that and can't deny that. But there's nothing else down there other than the fire station. So why do you include the whole street?
Okay, Councillor Beck.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the staff recommendation there on page 21. So they're saying not all of Hakanoa, but 75 metre either side. Is that the recommendation? Which is not what's shown.
No, that's where the confusion is.
Bessie, would you like to, or
Yeah.
Mr. Ballard?
If you go to page 28, it has a.
So, Madam Chair, I think the submission or the feedback we received was the whole of Hakanoa Street. What we're simply saying is not the whole of Hakanoa Street, just 75 metres either side of the fire station. And 75 metres is subjective. I mean, you could take it down to 50, you could take it down to 3. It was just an arbitrary figure that we took. My experience in Christchurch told me, inspecting down there after the earthquakes, it's better to err on the side of caution and have a little bit more space either side of some of these things, particularly on the footpath. But as I said, it's an arbitrary 75 metres, but certainly not the whole street.
I know I haven't got my hand up because I've got to walk around.
Councillor Beck. Councillor Beck.
Yeah, so with that, Mr. Bellick, you've said 75. It's not 3. Is it 75 or is 50? I mean, let's base it on the experience of Christchurch. How far does a facade fall, I guess, is the issue. And would you stick with your 75 or maybe reduce it slightly so as not to impact others?
We could reduce it through you, Madam Chair. We could reduce it, Councillor. We put 75 in, as I said. On a caution, I saw masonry and things, depending on the severity of the earthquake, flung quite some distance from buildings. I attended one home that was a brick exterior building, and the bricks we found 40, 50 metres away. The thing had shaken like a dog, if you will, shaking water off its coat, and they were flung quite a distance. So that was why we erred again on the side of caution.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gibb.
Just a question, Madam Chair. So the old fire station is obviously, as we know, offices, used as offices at the moment, but it's only 1 story. So I'm just a bit confused because I thought we were looking more at double story. And I wondered how much of that old fire station is the unreinforced masonry and how much is in the addition? I think there's an addition there that isn't the old bricks. So I'm just wondering how much detail have we gone into with the building?
Can you help there, Mr. Bellick?
So our contractor will have done an assessment on it, and they wouldn't have called it unreinforced if it wasn't. So clearly they were concerned enough to lodge it as unreinforced masonry, and the fact that it is right on the boundary, on the footpath, would give us cause for concern, Councillor.
Thank you. Just follow-up question though. So if part of the building is unreinforced, they're going to state the whole building, is that correct?
Part or parts, yes, or the whole,
Okay.
yes.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Yeah, my memory is that building is right on the footpath, so thank you for confirming that, Mr. Bellick. Page 28, if people haven't referred to that, has got the recommendation, I believe, not the whole length, depicts that 75 metres either side. So I'm happy with it if it needs moving, or we wait
So
till later.
can I just say something, Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Because I'm not getting up to walk around my desk to push the button, put my hand up. So I have no problem with this because the southern side of that building falls into their own car park. Where I do have a problem, and I'm trying to avoid us getting into trouble here, is on the northern side of it, it's up against the dwelling. So how does this impact on anybody in that dwelling in respect to them wanting to get a building consent or anything else? Maybe not Councillor Bellick, but maybe Mr. Bellick could answer that one for me, because what I don't want is unforeseen circumstances that actually put people into a zone they know nothing about to start with, and then they go to get a building consent and all of a sudden they're identified as being in a high pedestrian area and earthquake prone.
So through you, Madam Chair, if there was a building consent came in for that property, we would address that based on the merits of the consent. There may be some, yes, there may well be some work that's required to take place. Whether it's high priority or not, they would still have to fix it within 25 years rather than 12 and a half. So it would still be a earthquake prone building, sir.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing against it being an earthquake prone building. I'm trying to protect the poor old resident that lives on the northern side of the building, him being caught up in something that has got absolutely nothing to do with him, but as a downstream consequence, he's affected by it.
So in fact, if we look at it really clinically, it would be better for the resident that the thing was fixed in 12 and a half years than leaving it for 25, if I was to put my pragmatic hat on.
I don't disagree with that, but what I'm saying is the building consent I referred to, or any other consent required, I'm talking about the residential property, not the fire thing. So how does this affect somebody who wants to put a back veranda or a front veranda or do something, a new bathroom or something in their house? Are they affected by anything that we might put in place here now?
The answer may be yes.
Yeah, and that's
maybe.
Yeah, and that's
but
what
we can't. But sir, we cannot not do something.
I know, I'm not saying that, but I'm just, whether we put a file note on there or something, because what worries me is we've done this sort of thing in the past in unforeseen circumstances or situations, and all of a sudden somebody gets caught by a rule we created a decade ago, which leaves them hanging out to dry.
Interesting points. Councillor Gibb.
Yes, I've just thought of another point. So this Hakanoa Street, this particular site has been added to this, which wasn't in what went out for submissions. So that people who own that building wouldn't be aware that we're dealing with this at the moment, would they? I mean, or do they already know, Merv, that the building is under that earthquake category?
I may well know by now. I haven't seen the latest, but I'm assured by our contractor they are probably 99% through all the assessments. So these folk probably do know. And going back to the submitter's point, we didn't put those buildings on the information that went out because that's a very personal matter for those building owners, and we didn't want that spread and splayed across the whole district. You know, that would have been more or less putting a target on those folks.
So sorry, Murph, from a natural justice perspective,
Yep.
this road was never intended in our consultation to be on here at all. So I'm just wondering if the people on the whole of Hakanoa Street, not to mention the people that own this particular building, would have even taken an interest, because their road wasn't initially on there. So I know that we can't tell everybody everything, but I just was checking with the Madam Chair and anybody else who might have an opinion on natural justice here.
I think I would want an opinion on that other than my own. And I'm trying to work out if we can get around that through this conversation. Councillor Smith?
And Madam Chair, we're damned if we do and damned if we don't, because that is a building that's been identified by a consultant. So we must deal with the issue that's before us, and that is included. How much we include, and whether we, and this has been aired publicly, so if they're not aware of it and others are watching, I'm sure they will find out. But the reality is we cannot ignore it. We have a duty under the Act to do something. And so I think we do have to do something, but the reality is we have to absolutely confirm that they are aware of the latest issues and what the consequences are. And I think the Mayor has made an incredibly valid point, because unintended consequences have caught this council out. But this is a situation where the greater good, that is the safety of the community, I think it does override personal property interests. Thank you.
So we do have actually a couple of submissions on the, pardon me, on the same point, and I think submitters for 001 actually wanted the street to be shortened, if I'm on the correct street, down to the Bottle. So I'm assuming that's further down on the street, correct?
Main Street, yes.
Same street. Okay.
Can I just look, I think Councillor Smith is probably right here too. The issue is here, and I get what Councillor Gibbs talking about. The building is an unsupported building. I don't know whatever term Merv uses. What do you call it? URM. But at the end of the day, our job is to talk around: is this a high pedestrian area or not? Plain and simple. Is it or not? And if it is, we have to accept it and we put it in. End of story.
Madam Chair, I would personally think it isn't high pedestrian right there. And I'm not sure that we're talking about the same street. I think the Bottle, one of the local councillors could help me out here. The Bottle's on Great South Road, and that was the submission from the Kasoofs, which is in a different road altogether.
Yeah.
It's an extension of Main Street.
On Main Street, okay.
So
Okay.
Hakanoa Street's across the railway line.
Right, yep.
I probably wouldn't disagree with cutting it off at the, and we own the car park next to the Bottle anyway. So that's basically, there's no buildings that are close to the road. It's at that point with overhanging verandas anyway from the Bottle onwards. So.
Madam Chair, forgive me, have I become confused? I thought we were still talking about Hakanoa Street.
Yes, I threw that in because I got myself confused there, so I'm grateful for your interjection.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question, please? Is how can the local councillors and the Mayor help us out, their locals? Is this part of Hakanoa Street high pedestrian or not? Because I think that's the crux of the question that Councillor Gibbs asked.
No, it's not high pedestrian. No.
I'd have to agree with the councillors. I wouldn't imagine it's high pedestrian.
So then it's out.
Look, it's like anywhere else. There are pedestrians, but there's no more pedestrians there than there is 100 metres down the road. So it's not a high pedestrian area.
Is it something that would be put on a limb about the building itself? If whoever owns it, the old fire station, was to be sold, would it be noted that it's a UMR or URM or whatever it is?
Yes.
It is MRSA. And the reality is, I take the Mayor's point, don't affect the neighbour if we can.
Councillor Beck.
Yes, I think just reinforcing those comments, I think then we are arriving at a place of consensus. That is, we have a very, very narrow scope to consider today. It has to be both overlap of URM and high pedestrian. We've had some submissions on the previous streets that confused that and just focused on high pedestrian, but there weren't any URMs. Here we've got a URM, but not high pedestrian on the same basis. I suggest it's out.
And yet we've had a submitter saying it is high pedestrian. So
well, as always, I take the lead from the two councillors, and they're saying no, and I'd have to support them in that view too. It's pretty rare to see anybody walking around there unless they're going into the building.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of Hakanoa Street, where have
Delete it.
Yeah.
to leave it out?
Yeah.
So it qualifies in terms of a URM, but it doesn't qualify in terms of a high pedestrian.
No. Doesn't.
Therefore, sorry, Madam Chair, through you, therefore it will not qualify as a high priority building.
Correct. Okay, thank you. And then the one that I tried to introduce inadvertently was Main Street.
Yeah.
Probably would agree with that in relation to the Bottlow's, the last overhanging building. The rest are all set back from there on. So
Yeah.
I look at both the doctor's surgery and the accountant's office there. They're well back off.
Yeah.
Same as buildings. So yeah.
Agreed.
Councillor McAnally?
There is the old Brighton Dairy with an old veranda hanging over the footpath. That would concern me, by Roger Gills.
What about that? You're right.
Yeah. And it's pretty old. That would have to stay.
Mr. Belloc?
So it's up to you folk whether you want to put a gap in the middle there where the car park is and then have perhaps a 75, 50 metre zone either side of that building that you're discussing, or whether we just leave it all the way.
Right up to that point, whole Main Street, including the Bottle, solves all the problems. It's got a veranda. And a lot of pedestrians do walk under the old Brighton Dairy veranda every day.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? What about the old Sweetman building? That's right on the footpath, but it doesn't have a veranda? Is that
no veranda? It's only concrete block knoll.
Yeah.
And that's not a UMR?
No.
Or URM?
So have we reached? What I'm hearing is that that the stops. It either stops at the Bottle or it continues to the end of the marked.
Continues to the old Plunkett rooms. That's on the other side of the Brighton Dairy.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Yep.
Yeah, if it stopped where it is now, it's not taking in Brighton Dairy and also the front of Gill's building next door to Brighton Dairy. That's two levels as well, the old parts department. So I would say that's would be a URM. But we've actually quite missed the actual bits that Councillor McAnally are talking about.
Aren't we talking about?
South of
Aren't we talking about masonry?
Sorry?
URM.
Yeah, what is?
Yep.
Bricks, mortar.
Yeah.
Bills.
The front bit's the old ice cream factory where the spare parts were. Then you got Brighton Dairy right beside it.
Yeah, I know that.
Whoa, pull up. Can we, Mr. Belloc, can we just, are you familiar with that street? Not familiar.
Can I, Madam Chair, through you, can I ask Luke to come in at this point, please?
That would be lovely. Thank you very much.
Luke, are you able to comment on that? You've done the assessments through that area, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Merv. And good morning, all. The extent of what we are consulting on high pedestrian areas or high pedestrian traffic areas only that contain URM along those areas. In the case of the submission number 4, page 22, the high pedestrian area, as we've noted it, doesn't necessarily go quite as far as what we had intended. It should have gone up to the buildings as noted by Councillor McAnally. Those two buildings at the end of that yellow line are URM. we originally considered to have that high pedestrian area extending to that point. And the reason why is because we considered it to be a key walking route. This is a similar example with Hakanua Street, whereby there was an unreinforced masonry building on there, but that road was not considered a key walking route. So what we're actually consulting on here are high pedestrian areas and key walking routes. I hope that explains it.
It does. So thank you, Luke. So does that, by that, are you indicating that you want to extend the line on further than the yellow point that you have? Or are you comfortable that that's
yes? No, yeah, apologies. That's I mean, it's quite a high level map, but
yep.
That line, the intention was to go to that second building. I think it's 34 and 38 Main Road, and the intention was for it to go to that point because effectively those buildings are on a key walking route.
So there's one with an orange roof. Is that the one you're intending to include?
South of the orange roof.
South of the orange roof. So where we have the yellow line is correct.
I would say that where the yellow line could probably extend a little bit further to the grey portion.
Okay. Bessie, are you clear on that?
Yep. Noted.
Councillor Beck.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually less clear than I was at the beginning of that. So the map, for whatever reason, does not actually reflect the recommendation of staff in the first instance. So in other words, we either came to understand that we should have gone slightly further when we did the actual surveys, or just didn't show it correctly on the map to start with. Is that right?
Luke?
Correct.
Which one?
So we didn't extend it as far as what we should have.
Right. And so let's, I'm sympathetic to the view that we do. The only question that then remains is, do we have a gap or do we have one long continuous bit reflecting the fact that it is a walking route, but there are parts of it where there are no URMs immediately adjacent? That's possibly something we haven't quite addressed. Thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Just take out on Councillor Beck's point. I think if we were to have a gap, it would be too short a gap considering Mr. Ballock's earlier comments about Christchurch. And Luke has commented about numbers of streets, and the local councillor has talked about the old ice cream factory and the dairy. So can we have some alignment, please? Because I am more confused than before Luke spoke. So can we have alignment between the numbers and the actual buildings that we recognise? So whether that's Luke or Councillor McAnally, because I think we are trying to get to the end of the dairy and the spill over from that part, you know, like it's 40, 50, 75 metres past the dairy.
Councillor Wilson, is this on this topic?
Yes. I sort of...
could I have my question answered,
please? Do you have more to add on the specificity of the location?
I was going to say if we went to the old Sweetman's building, because that is a concrete block building, maybe it's might be reinforced, but then it would take that whole area and it'll all be just tidy everything up.
Yep, we go along with that.
Councillor McAnally?
I go along with Councillor Wilson on that, extend the whole up to the Bell Crossing.
Okay, so can you explain to me then the map on page 22, what does that relate to?
You've got the old Sweetman's buildings
I
here.
don't know. Could you just explain what you're seeing on that map?
I haven't got the map in front of me.
I can. Am I able to speak?
Yes, you are.
So basically, if you look at the picture where the green line is, the yellow line, and you got the orange roof, and it goes right up to the end of the buildings on the left.
To the end of the orange roof.
No. You keep to the orange roof, and then you got a gap, which I'm assuming is and then you got about 5 buildings on the grey on the left, and it takes up those whole lot, and that's where the dairy is.
So just to be clear, you are saying that that line includes the orange roofed building?
Yes, and then through that gap, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more roofs.
Little grey ones?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the reality is, if I may, that what Councillor Willison is what I alluded to earlier on about the Sweetlands building, is if you take Mr. Ballock's earlier comments about up to 75 metres, with you've got to go beyond the dairy and that building. So the 75 metres would actually take in up to the Sweetlands. Well, it was the Sweetlands building, it's something else now, but there's a huge car park. I'm not sure if that's where the toilets are, I can't remember exactly, but the car park is huge there. So if it went right through to the Sweetland building, that would take into account the 75 metre either side.
So the building you're referring to as the Sweetland building is which one?
Is the top grey one. If you look at the green line, there's a white dot underneath it. To the left of that, the end building there. So
okay,
you've got Park Ave on the right, but it's on the left. So you know that big area there is it's a well-known local building.
So this is a very difficult thing, I think, for Bessie to pick up and run with when you're calling it building names that don't exist. Or so can I ask perhaps Councillor McAnally or Councillor Lynch just to go over
to Bell Crossing,
to go to speak with Bessie on this. What are you saying, Councillor McAnally?
Go right to the Bell Crossing. That encompasses that vacant lot the other side of Sweetlands, the big car park area.
Maybe I can help
Sweetland
you with
building.
street number. So it's street number, main road, main street number. The last building, the Sweetland building, is number 12 Main Street, or most State Highway 1, whatever they call it now, Great South Road. So that's the last building. That's the Sweetland building, number 12. Rapid number.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, I've finished.
Okay, Melissa?
I was just going to suggest, if it's helpful, I can share my screen with the property numbers on it, if we do need that for clarification.
That would be lovely.
Oh, that'd be helpful. Thank you, because I haven't got a second screen, so I can't see it.
Can everybody see that?
Not yet.
No.
Magic's not working yet.
I think the mayor's done it for us anyway.
Yeah.
Number 12. That's the last building.
Done.
Thanks, Melissa. It's coming.
Just to clarify, which
yeah, number 12.
We're talking about this one here.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
If you can just pull the screen down a little bit, Melissa, because Frank's been talking about the Bell Crossing. No, the other way. Sorry, go up the other way. Yeah, so you can see the Bell Crossing Street there. That's where all those traffic islands are.
Okay, perfect.
Everybody clear? All agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Are we in a position now to move to the recommendation on page 18 that we give direction to staff on those changes, and subject to amendments, those amendments, this will be presented to Council on the 30th of June for adoption. I see your hand's still up. Councillor Smith, are you moving that?
Move it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And seconding, Councillor Patterson. Thank you very much. All in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Nobody carried. And that brings us to the end of the hearing. Thank you very much. Always strange when you think the devil is always in the detail of these things. Thank you very much. And we now have a slightly clearer day. So appreciate your participation, and I declare the hearing closed. Thank you. Grace, can you stop the live YouTubing? Still seeing live YouTube?
It's live on YouTube.